The conversation happened on a late evening in Ronaldo's Madrid home when most of the household staff had gone home for the day. But Carlos Herrera, the head chef who had been working for Ronaldo's family for almost 3 years, was staying late to prepare meals for the following week because Ronaldo had an intensive training schedule that required precise nutritional planning, and Carlos took his responsibility for the athlete's health and performance incredibly seriously. Even though nobody knew the full story of how he had arrived in Spain or what sacrifices he had made to reach this position in one of the most demanding and high-profile households in the world. Carlos had been working quietly in the kitchen when Ronaldo came downstairs looking for a late snack. And instead of just taking what he needed and leaving as he usually did, he noticed that Carlos seemed unusually quiet and distracted, chopping vegetables with less precision than normal. And when Ronaldo asked if everything was okay, Carlos initially brushed off the question, saying he was just tired. But Ronaldo, who had developed an intuition for reading people's emotional states after years of dealing with his own pressure and stress, pressed gently, asking if there was something more serious bothering him. It was then that Carlos, who had been carrying a heavy burden alone for months, finally broke down and told Ronaldo the story he had never shared with anyone about his journey from Honduras to Spain. A journey that had begun 8 years earlier when violence in his hometown had made it impossible for him and his family to stay safe, and he had made the agonizing decision to leave behind his wife, Maria, and their 2 young children, promising to send for them once he had established himself somewhere safe and found steady work that could support them all. Carlos explained through tears that he had worked in restaurant kitchens across Central America and Mexico for years, saving every possible peso to pay for documentation and travel expenses while sending what little he could back to his family, who were struggling to survive in increasingly dangerous conditions where his brother had been killed and his neighbors were being extorted by gangs who controlled their neighborhood with violence and fear. The journey to Spain had taken 2 years of working in kitchens from Mexico City to Barcelona, learning new techniques and languages while living in tiny shared apartments and eating 1 meal a day so he could save money, but also building the skills that would eventually make him valuable to employers who needed someone with his combination of technical ability, work ethic, and understanding of international cuisine that could meet the exacting standards of elite clients. When he finally reached Madrid, Carlos had worked in several high-end restaurants, but the position with Ronaldo's family had been a dream opportunity, not just because of the salary, but because it offered the stability and legal documentation that would eventually allow him to bring his family to Spain legally and safely, rather than asking them to make the dangerous journey that had already cost him years of separation from the people he loved most. But now, 3 years later, Carlos was facing a crisis that threatened to destroy everything he had worked for, because his wife had been diagnosed with a serious heart condition that required surgery and specialized care that was not available in Honduras, and the costs were far beyond what he had been able to save while also supporting his family's basic needs and sending money for his children's education. The medical expenses, combined with the legal fees for bringing his family to Spain legally, were astronomical, and Carlos had been working extra hours and side jobs trying to earn additional income. But it wasn't nearly enough, and he was terrified that he would lose Maria before he could get her the help she needed, or bring her to Spain where she could receive proper medical care. Ronaldo listened to this story without interrupting, asking only occasional questions to better understand the situation. And when Carlos finished speaking, Ronaldo was quiet for a long moment before asking practical questions about the specific medical treatment Maria needed, the costs involved, and the timeline for bringing the family to Spain legally, rather than making empty promises or offering sympathy that wouldn't solve the actual problems Carlos was facing. The next morning, Ronaldo called his legal team and his financial advisors, and within days he had arranged not only to cover all of Maria's medical expenses, including flying her to a top cardiac hospital in Madrid for surgery, but also to expedite the legal immigration process for Carlos's entire family, using his connections and resources to navigate bureaucratic systems that would have taken Carlos years to manage alone. But Ronaldo didn't stop there, because he understood that Carlos's story was not unique and that there were likely many other people in similar situations who didn't have access to someone with resources who could help. He established a foundation specifically to support immigrant families who were separated by legal and financial barriers, with a focus on providing emergency medical care, legal assistance, and family reunification services for people who were working hard to build better lives but facing systemic obstacles that were impossible to overcome without help. The foundation, which Carlos helped design based on his own experiences, provided not just financial assistance, but also mentorship and job training programs that helped immigrants develop skills that would make them financially independent and able to support their own families without ongoing assistance. The goal was not charity, but empowerment, giving people the tools and opportunities they needed to succeed, rather than creating dependency. When Maria arrived in Madrid for her surgery, she was so overwhelmed by Ronaldo's generosity that she could barely speak. But he insisted that no thanks were necessary because, he said, Carlos had been taking care of his family's health and nutrition for years, and it was only right that someone should take care of Carlos's family when they needed help. The surgery was successful, and during Maria's recovery in Madrid, she stayed in a guest house that Ronaldo provided, where Carlos could take care of her while continuing his work, something that would have been impossible if she had remained in Honduras, or if they had tried to manage the medical crisis without support. Carlos's children arrived in Spain 6 months later, and Ronaldo made sure they were enrolled in good schools with tutoring support to help them adjust to a new language and educational system. He also created a college scholarship fund for them because he said, education was the most important investment anyone could make in building a secure future. 3 years after that emotional conversation in the kitchen, Carlos had been promoted to manage all of Ronaldo's nutritional planning and had opened his own catering business with Ronaldo as his first major client, providing the initial investment and ongoing support that allowed Carlos to build financial independence while staying connected to the family that had supported him during his greatest crisis. But perhaps the most meaningful outcome was the ripple effect of Carlos's story, which Ronaldo shared publicly with Carlos's permission to highlight the contributions that immigrants make to their communities and the importance of supporting people who are working hard to build better lives for their families. The story inspired other wealthy individuals to create similar programs in their own communities and led to policy discussions about making legal immigration processes more accessible and affordable for families who were already contributing to their adopted countries through their work and commitment to their communities. When Carlos's son graduated from university with a degree in culinary arts and business, he wrote a letter to Ronaldo thanking him not just for the financial support, but for treating his father with dignity and respect during a time when Carlos felt invisible and desperate, and for showing the entire family that their struggles mattered and their dreams were worth supporting. The letter concluded with a promise that he would spend his career creating opportunities for other immigrant families because he had learned from Ronaldo's example that true success means using your advantages to lift others up rather than simply accumulating more for yourself. Carlos still works for Ronaldo's family, but now as a partner in multiple business ventures rather than just an employee, and their relationship has evolved into a deep friendship based on mutual respect and shared values about the importance of family, hard work, and using success to create opportunities for others who are facing the same challenges they once overcame. The foundation they created together has helped hundreds of immigrant families reunite and build stable lives, and has become a model for other organizations working on immigration issues because it focuses on practical solutions and long-term empowerment rather than temporary assistance that doesn't address the root causes of family separation and economic insecurity.